Welcome, everyone. We're delighted to have so many of you joining us from around the world today for our online event, Nature-Based Solutions, Unlocking Urban Potential. I think it's probably fair to say that 2020 hasn't quite worked out the way that we were expecting it to, and particularly, it was supposed to be a golden year for addressing nature and climate challenges. But nonetheless, despite all of the crises and the issues that we've been facing, it's been amazing to see the continued momentum and energy, enthusiasm that is coming together around questions of biodiversity, nature, and of course now well-being and health. And today we're focusing our attention on how nature-based solutions can help address these sustainable development challenges globally. So we've gathered together today, welcoming people from all corners of the world, probably in your various time zones. So we're not necessarily expecting everybody to stay with us all day, but we'll be looking at how nature-based solutions can help to unlock urban potential for sustainable development. And what is it that cities can do to help to mobilize nature-based solutions towards addressing these very real, important sustainability challenges. So we're joined today by experts from around the world and by many, many participants from all different kinds of countries who are going to bring their knowledge and expertise, interest and energy together. And we hope it's going to be a really interesting and fun day for all of us to explore these issues together. We've got a range of different kinds of sessions that we'll be having today. So we've got panels where we're going to bring experts together in discussion with moderators, and we'll be gathering your questions from the chat to put towards those panel members. And then we've got Meet the Experts sessions, which allow a little bit more in-depth discussion and engagement with the team from the Naturvation project that's sponsoring the event today. Alongside that, if you've got a moment and you're looking for some more information, you'll find hives of information on some key topics where we've gathered together some of our most important findings from across the Naturvation project. There are all sorts of films and podcasts, reports, blogs and things for you to get into there. And then we've got the information hub where you'll find our reports and kind of key findings from the project. So please do explore the whole of the website, the whole of the conference while you're here. And we hope you have a really fun, interesting and enjoyable day with us. I'm going to hand over to Kes McCormick, who's Associate Professor at Lund University, who's going to introduce the plenary session that we're starting just now and the speakers that we've got with us today. And I hope you have a really great day with us here at the conference.
Thank you very much, Harriet. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you are in the world. It's fantastic to have you here today at our Naturvation conference on nature-based solutions, unlocking urban potential. As Harriet said, my name is Kes McCormick and I'm an Associate Professor at Lund University in Sweden. I'm also a proud member of the Naturvation team, but most importantly, I'm your moderator for the opening session today. Now, look, online events are being called the new normal. We're doing a lot of them nowadays, but I think we're also just getting used to this so-called normal. And in this online world, it can actually be pretty fantastic. For example, today, we've got 1,000 people checking in and we didn't even need to book a room or do any catering, which is pretty special. As Harriet also said, you will find an amazing diversity of activities and materials on our conference platform, so make sure you go exploring after this opening session. But turning our attention to this opening session, we will focus on a big question, a key question. How can nature-based solutions unlock the potential of cities to develop cleaner, greener futures? And how can cities unlock the possibilities that nature-based solutions have for addressing the challenges of sustainability at the global scale? This is indeed a big question, and we've got some great speakers today, 3 different people from Australia, the Netherlands and Sweden, who are going to jump into this challenging question and give you their perspectives on how we can work with nature-based solutions in cities. So the structure of this opening session is pretty simple. We're going to listen to these 3 speakers first, and then we're going to jump into questions, including questions from our global audience. Yep, that's right, that's you. So get into the chat where we have some chat moderators lurking in the background, selecting out the best and brightest questions, and let us know what you're thinking while we hear the speakers today. So, without further ado, we will jump into our first speaker today. Our first speaker is Kathy Oak, all the way from Melbourne, Australia. Kathy is an Enterprise Senior Fellow in Informed Cities at the Connected Cities Lab at Melbourne University. She's also a counsellor at the City of Melbourne, where I think she's been a counsellor for about 12 years now, if I'm not correct. And she's the first Vice President of ICLEI Local Government for Sustainability. We are very, very happy to have Kathy here today. As you may have guessed, she's also in Melbourne, Australia, which is my hometown, originally from Australia. So we've got two Australians on stage to kick off. Kathy, the virtual room is yours. I will put up your slides now and just let me know when you want me to click through them. Over to you, Kathy.
Goodness, thank you, Kes. What an honour to be the first speaker at this amazing event. So thank you to Harriet and to Kes for this opportunity to come to you from Melbourne, Australia, in my evening over here. And yes, certainly, as is custom in Australia, I would like to begin by acknowledging the traditional custodians of the land that I present from this evening, the Woiwurrung Wurundjeri peoples of the Kulin Nations, and I pay my respects to elders, both past, present, and emerging. And certainly, when I talk about unlocking the potential of cities to address global sustainability challenges, I immediately look to the Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander peoples of Australia for advice, because they've been caring for country where our Australian cities now stand for over 60,000 years. You know, the world's longest living culture in the world certainly knows something about resilience and sustainability. And we should be doing much more of forefronting First Nations knowledge and perspectives when we look to address global issues around sustainability. So again, yes, thank you for the opportunity to speak at this Naturvation event. I, always been a big fan of your project, and we can go into more of that in the chat later. But I wear many hats, and thank you for reading them all out, Kes. But I've chosen to focus my initial remarks on what the City of Melbourne has been doing around nature-based solutions to address urban challenges locally, but with the global impact in mind. And this is because, and some of you already know this, but this is after 12 years at the City of Melbourne, this is my last speech that I'll be giving from a councillor perspective on the greening initiatives in my city. So I'm using my time for that. And certainly in Melbourne, climate change and other threats are challenging our city, impacting people, plants, animals, not only through heat and floods, but there's also, the added impact of densification and growth. And in response to this, the City of Melbourne have done many things over many, many years. Way before my time, they started thinking about nature as a key to our city. But certainly bringing up even just to this year and late last year when we declared not only a climate emergency, but a biodiversity emergency too. Kes, next slide, please. So as I said, we've had nature-based solutions as central keys to our mitigation and adaptation plans for decades. 9 of our sustainability strategies prominently feature solutions with biodiversity, canopy, water and biodiversity sensitive urban design, green infrastructure, open space, at the core. And all of these strategies and plans and implementation actions have been developed in partnerships with cities, with other cities locally, internationally, with city networks, with researchers from Melbourne and across the world, with other levels of government, developers, architects, designers, scientists, both citizen and professional. Really important that when we're addressing nature, we're doing it with as many urban actors as possible. Next slide, Kes. And so, yes, of course, as I said, we've been doing many ambitious plans for many years, but at the start of this year, as part of the 10 priorities for accelerated climate and biodiversity action, you can see that not only are we addressing what's within our jurisdiction in the public realm and thinking about how we adapt the city, how we influence others to take action, and how we tell the story. At all of these levels, we're including urban greening and biodiversity in our story. And certainly this slide was produced at the start of the year in response to the climate and biodiversity emergency. But the work that we've done over so many years has set us up not only to know what we needed to accelerate here, but when we have been responding to COVID and being ready for a green recovery as part of the economic stimulus plans, it's been really important that we've known what we needed to do and we're ready to take action. And I'll talk a little bit more about that in a moment. Next slide, Kes. What is it that we're wanting to do? What is it that we're wanting to see? Certainly we're wanting to see greening to cool our city, to increase habitat for stormwater runoff and mitigation of it, for food, for health, for well-being, and for recreation. We want to see greening everywhere. Next slide, Kes. I only have a few minutes, but I certainly wanted to talk about what we have done. And I could spend a year talking about all of the images on this slide, maybe just about the blue-banded bee that you see there, one of my favorite creatures. But no, what I wanted to talk about were things that we've done in the public realm that we have control over. We've greened our laneways. We've conducted many bioblitzes with over 200 citizens each time to understand about our rich biodiversity. We're doing that to help us double a canopy in our city over the next 20 years, all with really strong evidence from our research partners. And importantly for me, really focusing also in the last 3 years on the understory and the biodiversity in our streets and parks and gardens. And over the last 3 years, we have increased it by 5.4%. And the results that we'll look at soon are going to be even more impressive, because you might have seen recently in the news, our partners at the University of Melbourne have planted 1 million seeds in one of our parks, the Royal Park, where we're aiming to grow the world's first Indigenous wildflower meadow, hoping to learn really valuable lessons about the most effective way to increase biodiversity. And this trial, as well as our Greening the City initiative to plant 150,000 trees in the last 6 months as a response to COVID. We've created really a lot of green jobs, but it's amazing. It's really helping already. You can see us increasing biodiversity in the city, which importantly for us, that's about creating that resilient and livable city that we need to keep a focus on regardless of COVID, and maybe even more so. And really importantly, the private realm, which is 70% of our municipality and often the barrier to the ambitions that we have around greening. The Urban Forest Fund that you can see there matches private dollars to increase greening in the private realm. And over the last 4 years, the last 2 rounds, we've seen the return on investment of 4 to 1. So for $1.2 million investment of our money, we've had $4.9 million of value, almost 6,000 square meters of new private greening from 33 projects and in spaces that we wouldn't normally have control over. And finally, what I'm really proud to see, and only just last week, the City of Melbourne Council has endorsed Australia's first Green Factor tool. And that is included also as part of a draft planning scheme amendment for new sustainability and greening requirements. And this Green Factor tool, which I know that there are many Green Factor tools all over the world, but it's taken us 10 years to get to ours, just in particularly the last couple of years. A lot of great work. And this Green Factor tool will help us to quantify and benchmark quality greening in new buildings, providing really meaningful guidance to designers wanting to optimize greening and concepts and built outcomes, and connected to all of that research that we've done around biodiversity and the tree canopy that we're wanting. So it's very much an evidence-based approach, which sings Naturvation all over it. And finally, next slide, Kes. Obviously, we're very much interested in connecting the local to the global, and I could have found lots of photos of you, Harriet, but I found the one of you to note that, you know, cities, we're playing very significant role in global biodiversity and conservation, and we're stewards of biodiversity locally, but we need to be advocates on the world stage as well on conservation issues in particular biodiversity. And the last 10 years, I've spent a lot of time with my colleagues at the ICLEI City Biodiversity Centre and with leading researchers like Harriet, arguing that city leaders must play their part and respond with prioritised and budgeted actions around nature. And Melbourne is a pioneer Cities with Nature city. By updating our information on the portal with other cities, we can learn together, but also add our voice to that collective action of cities and regions pushing for stronger recognition on the world stage. And Kunming next year is a really crucial opportunity, and it's imperative that we strengthen and embed the role that cities play in conservation. And I think that's my time up. So back to you, Kes.
Thank you so much, Kathy. I think that the City of Melbourne is truly a kind of a world leader in this space on cities and nature, and I think that you've been a pretty big part of it. So it's very fun to have you here giving a final speech in your days as a councillor. We're going to hear more from you later. Questions are already rolling in, but we will jump to our next speaker now, who's a little bit closer to where I'm sitting. Our second speaker today is Peter Stein, who is the Director for Healthy Urban Living at Utrecht Municipality in the Netherlands. As a member of the Executive Board, Peter works with achieving a healthy living environment in order to keep the region healthy, safe, economically vital, accessible and attractive. Wow, Peter, it sounds like a pretty fun job. It also sounds like I should be moving to Utrecht very soon. But it's wonderful to have you here today, and the virtual room is now yours, and I will get your slides up on the screen. Over to you, Peter.
Thank you, Kes. You are very welcome to come to Utrecht in the next period. We will have a good program for you. Well, in the next 10 minutes, I will tell you, all the public, what is Utrecht doing in the next 20 years to become a green city, or at least a more green city than we are now. First slide, please. Maybe you can get back to the first slide. I can tell you some information about Utrecht as a city. We are the fourth city in the Netherlands. We have 350,000 inhabitants. We are a historical city. As you can see in the pictures, we have our famous Dom Church at the medieval times. We have very interesting girds. We have questioned a gird in 50 years ago, and last week, after a long period of developing, we have opened the gird in a new canal. So this is what Utrecht is. Utrecht is a very fast-growing city. In the next 20 years, we will have 100,000 inhabitants more than we have now. So to become there, we have to build a lot of houses, 60,000 in the next 20 years, and also a lot of working places we have to make, and all the amenities connected with growing as a city, all the services, the new connection, the infrastructures, of course. And very important in this kind is how we can combine and have a balance between densifying the city and becoming a green city. What is a green city for us? Well, a healthy city is a green city. And in other words, what are green cities for us? Livable cities, resilient to climate and water risk, and investing in nature-based solutions. Cities help to tackle flooding, heat stress, drought, poor air quality, and unemployment, and helps biodiversity to flourish. Maybe you can come to the next slide. This is what we want to aim in the next 20 years. A green city, as I said, a green city with all the green qualities inside the city, but also connected with the surroundings of our city. A green city in the middle of a green surrounding. Next slide, please. Slide. To become there, we have to tackle a lot of problems, of course. You see three of the big problems. We try to aim all the building ambitions inside the city because we like to spare the landscapes around the city. Then we've got a lot of problems between the neighborhoods. The life expectancies in the different neighborhoods are very diverse, very big variety, more than 10 years between some neighborhoods. So we have to tackle this problem also. And then, of course, the heat stress, the climate change, we have to solve this problem in the next 20 years. Next slide, please. To do all these things, we have made a plan, an urban spatial plan. We are developing this plan, and a big part of it is the landscape and the green structures of it. And we made 4 big strategies to become a greener city. This is the first strategy, and I'll tell you something about it. It is a program of widening the green fingers plus the green redevelopment of a green belt in the city fringes. What do we want to achieve? More undisturbed space for plants and animals and better exchange possibilities. Outdoor is closer to residents and users, faster access to landscapes. And for example, what we need to make is new bridges for pedestrians and bikers, as you see in the picture. Next slide, please. This is the first strategy. The second has to do with all the connections inside the city. And well, it's very important to have a green framework, a construction of green connections between the parks, the neighborhoods, and outdoors. What do we want to achieve? Strengthen the urban ecosystem through better migration of plants and animals, and offer green nearby for residents and users and nice routes to the parks. This is the second strategy. Then the third one, next slide, please. Well, with a lot of more inhabitants, as I told, we need to make very big room for new big parks. And we call it, as one of our aldermen has introduced the word streaks. Well, we have to make new parks, green streaks, add large city parks with a size that is new to Utrecht. And what do we want to achieve? It requires the greening of areas with urban functions and land tunnels above railway lines and national roads. And we made one in the last years. This is the third strategy, and then we go to the fourth. Next slide, please. Well, we have to make robust greening of the green poor neighborhoods. There are very big differences between the green situation in the different neighborhoods, and we try to make all the neighborhoods as green as possible. Greener living conditions in the neighborhoods for plants and animals in the Bear Center, of course. It requires redesigning 800 streets and relocating of 500 parking places, rearranging underground infrastructure, and so on. So this is the fourth strategy. And in the next slide, please. You can see this is not a program we can do in a very short period, of course. We will have a lot of time until 2040 to do the things, and we will do it in step by step, following, well, the different possibilities. Next slide. It's not only a task to do for the municipality in its own, of course. In Utrecht, we are very used to work together with our stakeholders and participants, and also the inhabitants, and to combine the different approaches to redevelop and develop the city as a whole. So we try to connect the greening of the city with all the other important change and transformation tasks we have to do. The energy transition, of course, the new mobility, very important in a city as Utrecht, situated in the midst of the country with the new station, which is the most busiest mobility hub in the Netherlands. So mobility is a very big question, and our main approach is to give more room to pedestrians and bikers in the city, and also the public transport on a new basis. And that we can combine with the greener of the city, because when all the cars in the inner city go to the fringes of the city, then we've got room for the greening of the city. Well, this job we have to do with all the participants and the stakeholders, of course. Next slide, please. Well, this is not a free lunch, of course. This is a big investment program, as is the spatial strategy as a whole. You see the 4 strategies in terms of what it costs to invest in it. And altogether, it makes an amount of 1.5 billion euros. So we've got a lot of money to spend on our own budget, but also the need of the help of the other stakeholders and, of course, the public authorities on the national level as the main participant in this. Next slide. Well, this is the end of my story. I hope to have told you what we are trying to do in the next 20 years, growing fast as we do, but with the main focus on how can we balance the densifying of the city with becoming a more green city, because it's nice to live in a green city, but it's also a very conditional thing to approach all the challenges of the climate change we focus. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Peter. I can hear the applause from Australia to the Netherlands. It's a fantastic slide to finish on that says the end. If that's the end point that we're heading towards, I think we'll all be pretty happy. Again, I think Utrecht as a city definitely has world-leading ambitions and pretty sophisticated ways of thinking about public space and nature and how to engage citizens and so on. So I think you're going to get some questions later on after we've finished our speeches. So stay there, and we'll be back to you in a little bit. Okay, over to our final speaker today, who is indeed very close to me, although up in Stockholm, I'm down in Lund. Carl Bäckstrand will be our final speaker today, and he's a partner and deputy CEO at White Architects. Carl seems to be engaged in many activities connecting to social and climate challenges, and he's also very much focused on contributing to bring business closer to science and building strategic partnerships. All I can say is if we could get a little bit more science into business, Carl, that would be great for the world we live in. So the floor is over to yours, the virtual room. I will get your slides up and click them through. Final speaker, over to you, Carl.
Thank you, Kes. And first of all, thanks to all of you for inviting me to this session. So let's see here. First image, please. Where we start. So, having followed Naturvation on its journey with all the amazing team of researchers, my role has, as Kes said, been more to reflect and comment from a business and practitioner's perspective. And I've learned so much and how to manage our mission to use architecture, being an architect myself, then to drive this transition for a sustainable life on the planet. And I'm convinced that we need to do more of those collaborations. So next slide, please. And working with nature-based solutions for us at White and myself, it's a lot about taking action for climate and the social aspects. We need to do this in parallel. We cannot manage climate change without talking equity and have a social focus. We need dialogues, and we need bringing the stakeholders, the many stakeholders, to the table. Next slide, please. And this is what we did a few years ago when we won the competition for moving the city of Kiruna. Kiruna is a small city, or a town more, you should say, in the very north of Sweden. It's a mining town, and because of the iron ore, the town is more or less imploding, and it has to move further east. And when we did this competition, for us it was very important to start talking with the people of Kiruna then and ask questions. What do they really value in their existing city? What do they want to bring into the new ones, and what is the identity they share. And we found out that nature plays a very, very important role for the people of Kiruna. And therefore, in the new city, it's not only we are proposing new parks, it's also how the city is connecting to the surrounding nature in a very well-defined and structured way. And also how the nature is linked to the transportation, the way you are moving in the city. So the nature is always present in that sense, and also having a long perspective. This was a plan for the coming 50 years. Next slide, please. And in Sweden, and I would say in many places in the world, I mean, it's so important that doing test beds. And when I'm talking test beds, it's for me where cities invest together with developers in a joint partnerships. And in places like Malmö in Sweden in the early 2000s, and now in this image more lately in Linköping, there has been those test beds, and it's test beds for actual design work, but it's also a lot of test beds for how to manage planning processes. And we heard before from Kathy in Melbourne about the green factor tool that is now introduced in Melbourne. But in Malmö in the early 2000s, this was already in that test bed for the Western Harbour, and it was very interesting to see how it improved the number of green facades, big trees in the in the courtyards, green roofs, number of different plants, and how that then of course rendered different points, and encouraging to achieve a biodiversity, avoiding heat islands, flooding, etc. And most important, I think, or just as important as having those environmental success, it was also a business success. The investors, the developers, they also saw that investing in those nature-based solutions, it increased the value of the properties. And I mean, that make it a business case that could be taken into other developments in Sweden at that time. So that I think is important to remember. Next, please. Next slide. And more lately then, we've tried to upscale this thinking when we are also looking outside of Sweden. And this is images from a competition in Montreal for a new biodiversity corridor. And it's a great initiative by the city of Montreal, where they, as you can see on the bottom line of the slide there, it's a huge new green front, you could say, that is adding to the waterfront along the river. And this is, of course, not only a green front, it's a very important new public space that will improve how you can walk in the city of Montreal and bike, and as you can see, local farming and improving the biodiversity that has been mentioned before. But it's a big project. Unfortunately, we didn't win this one, but I mean, there are others that are following up on that. And I think the initiative from the city of Montreal is very, very good. Next slide, please. Earlier on in New York, we all know about the Hurricane Sandy that badly hit the city. At that time, or after that, the mayor Bloomberg, he launched a competition in Rockaway Beach outside of the Manhattan. And here we had to deal with flooding, of course. That was the main thing here. And together with Arup, it was a lot about how to mitigate the waves to reach the shore, of course, with sort of islands underwater, you can see there. But for us as architects, more important was how to deal with the environment on land then, and how to introduce new wetlands that also bring areas for children to play, sport fields, and urban farming when there is not any flooding. Most of the time there are no flooding, but then it's a resource for activities. Next slide, please. And now moving south to the city of Kisumu, next to Lake Victoria in East Africa. Here we are engaged in a master plan for an area that is situated along the shore, along the water. And this is very sensitive because of many things, but one important part has to do with the people. Many people, they have their income from the water as fishing and etc. And of course, they are very, very afraid of losing that now when the city is growing. And the lessons learned from all or many parts then around the world where we have been involved is that we need to have a strong engagement from the local community and start discussing, asking questions before having any idea of what to do. And of course, how to do anything. We need to have this dialogue up running. And it's so much we learn out of this. And this is really the way to move forward. So always asking questions. Next slide, please. And the final example here is nearby Kisumu. It's in Nairobi, where we are involved or almost finishing a project for a new college building. And when starting this project, the client, as in many times, they were more concerned with programming the building, a college building. I mean, how would that work? But our approach was to make the landscape as important as the building itself. And I mean, the landscape also including the roof, of course. I mean, and then being a sustainable building, it should have PVs on the roof, etc. We also wanted people to be able to be on part of the roof to see how this is really working. And then on the ground, I mean, it's not very much to see in this now, but in the future, it will be a fantastic landscape there that will also, of course, treat everything with stormwater. But even more important, I think, is that we are also introduced to have classrooms outside where you can understand how the ecosystem is working and having that as part of the environment, so to say, the learning environment. Next slide, please. We are breaking the silos, I should say, there also. We're working cross-disciplinary. And then finally, last week, I think some of us listened into when Ursula von der Leyen were having her State of the Union speak. And I can't express how happy I was hearing her in that speak talking about how we need to work interdisciplinary and we need to work with style and sustainability in order to build a new future into this and bringing architecture to the forefront in this new the Green Deal and the Next Generation EU. So thank you.
Thank you, Carl. What a quote to finish on. From Malmö to East Africa, I mean, I think you kind of open up the picture here that this is not just about European cities or Australian cities or cities in the Western world, but I mean that this is, you know, a challenge and an opportunity for cities all over the world in development where we see it happening. You're a man known of many names as well, Carl and Charlie. There's some chat in the background about are you Carl or are you Charlie? I think I know you well enough to call you Charlie as well, so I might refer to you Charlie as we go on from here. You three speakers are absolutely brilliant. It's the easiest moderation job ever. I haven't had to tap on the screen or get you to quickly rush through your final slides. You've all kept to time. So we have lots of time available to us now for questions and discussion. And I'm going to launch off with a few of my own questions, and then I'm going to start looking in the chat to see what's been picked out by our chat moderators from people around the world watching and listening. So let's return back to Kathy first. I'll come back to you, Kathy. You're going to get the first one. I think all of you have pointed to the potential of nature-based solutions and the fact that they're probably in a process of takeoff. And I suppose a key question we want to kind of dive into is, you know, what have you found that it takes to get nature-based solutions recognized as having this potential in your activities and work? Over to you, Kathy. What do you think?
Oh, well, we all know the success factors are many and varied. Certainly, tenacity and continual pressure is a strong factor. But I think a lot of the success is around evidence, right? And that evidence is different for each audience that you're trying to address. You're needing to understand that what your community think about nature, and what are the opportunities that they see for nature in their neighborhoods or in their city, and you need to work with that. I mean, I think all of us have presented on various aspects of that. You need to understand that, as what do politicians need in order to make decisions about budgets or prioritizing aspects, of which there's thousands of decisions or inputs that come our way. How do you make sure that nature is not only across a lot of them but at the front, right? And a lot of that is about the evidence, of whether it's around return on investment from a dollar point of view, but also return on investment for value for many and for different projects. And I know I've seen who's in the audience, and I know that there are many people watching, and certainly the people here that understand the varied values of nature, but and some of us come with a background in science that can really understand the complexity there. But you also need to make sure that you're engaging in ways that that make sense for people that may not have a science background. And that's where citizen science activities are really important, and engaging people in nature in different ways is really key. So I've found certainly the city of Melbourne, it's not been easy. I mean, we've got some really great stories, but and we've certainly got a really great range of projects that we're involved in. But it takes a lot of you've just got to maintain it, be consistent, continue to bring the data. And I think that's one of the great things in Melbourne, is that we've not only got our amazing tree visual tool, we now have biodiversity visual tools, and we wouldn't have that if we didn't have a really strong relationship with the researchers and the scientists, not only within the city of Melbourne, of which we're blessed with the amazing network of scientists in Melbourne, but globally as well. So, and sharing knowledge is really key. I could go on forever, but I'll stop. I'll let you ask another question.
Absolutely. I know we could all go on for a long time. No, but I think these points of evidence and so on are so important. I'm actually going to jump over Peter for a second. I'm going to come back to you, Peter. I'm going to jump to Carl, or Charlie, my good friend. What's your take on this same question? I mean, what have you found that it takes to get NBS's potential recognised in these kind of development projects that you're involved in?
Yeah, as I was sort of mentioning, I mean, we have a problem many times that investors, developers, they don't from the start see the value in putting money into this. So, I mean, a big challenge for us is to have to show how that will increase the value in the future, in the long-term perspective, of course. And I mean, I think now when we have many examples of this from various parts. I mean, you have shown in Utrecht, in Melbourne, and we all know where those examples are. I mean, it makes it easier in a way, but I would say still the big concern is to get the developers on board. I mean, cities are in general quite active on this. I think we believe it's a very there's a lot of interest, there's a lot of knowledge in it. But when it comes to put the money there into those investments, it's still a challenge. But I think having more of those figures where we can prove how it develop in the future, I mean, then it will be easier. But it is, and I think that has been part also of this Naturvation project, also to do research on that. How can we find new business models into this? And I think that will help us as practitioners a lot. And that was partly one interest I specifically had in being part of this, to have those discussions on that. So, yeah.
Fantastic, Carl. Well, we have business models, that's for sure. We have quite a bit of work around that topic, and I think there's even sessions at this conference where you can learn about financing and the business case and business strategies with nature-based solutions. Questions are flowing in now. Peter, you seem to have been a star of the show. There's a few questions for you here. Lane has just made a point here, which I think that you basically highlighted the socioeconomic kind of weak areas, often exactly those that do not have enough green spaces. This is something I think we all know, but sometimes forget to mention highly enough, and that they suffer from various negative impacts. And she says, thank you very much for highlighting this. But I also have a question for you, Peter, from Martina, who says, how do you involve and engage the local people in greening cities? And is everyone enthusiastic about plans to green their city? Are they all jumping on board and cheering as we green our cities? Or is there a few challenges along the way? Over to you, Peter.
Thank you. Well, it should be wonderful when it was this situation, as you mentioned, but this is not the case in Utrecht, of course not. Still, nevertheless, we have a lot of support in the city for greening the city. And I think it's not as strange as it seems, because a green city is a better city for people to live in. What is relevant is the transformation process. And that takes a lot of problems to tackle. And then you've got a good debate, of course. You've got to show what are the profits of greening the city. Not all the people see the profits in the first time. So what Carl said about successful projects is very important, because what we did in some streets where we could change the situation with less cars and more space for plants and trees and so on, well, you can visibly make the people conscious of what is the importance of greening the city. So it starts with very small projects, and of course you can scale up when the support is growing with the successful plans you are realizing. So this is our situation. We have a lot of support. Utrecht has more or less the image of being a green city. So the attractiveness of the city is growing more and more. A lot of people who haven't been in the city for years and come back are very surprised of how the visibility of the city is changing and coming better every day. So this is what we need. To show with the successful projects and the successful examples what's the importance of doing this.
Great point. We have some more questions flowing in, and I'm going to have to take this question for Kathy, because this is the classic Australian question about wildlife and so on. But this is a serious question, Kathy, from Kiaran, I believe the name is, that in countries like Australia and so on, that when you bring biodiversity and wildlife back into the city, it can pose a few risks if it's things like snakes or other kinds of animals. I mean, is there a discussion and strategy around that when we talk about increasing nature in the city? What happens when we bring more biodiversity and wildlife into our cities?
I'll just go and get my snake from my, no. Yes, I saw that question. It's interesting. I mean, obviously we need to remember that, all native animals in Australia are protected. And certainly if we want to bring nature back into our city, we are talking about bringing plants and animals back into our cities. And, I'm regularly looking at our community Facebook page, and there's often I saw a tiger snake on my walk down the creek. And that's only just down the road there. So absolutely, the snakes are all around. It's what I'm really pleased about when I see this chat in this local Facebook group. None of it's like, oh, well, some of it is, oh my God, I've got to run and they're scared. But it's actually generally just, I'll be aware and know that there's something there. And I think that that's probably, the approach that we need to take. It's that I personally, I love sharks and I love snakes, right? So, and I love spiders. So, maybe I'm weird, but I think, that's what we aspire to, is actually bringing back the nature that was here. But we need to do it with, people in mind. And that is about making sure people are aware if there are particular areas in a city where you might have venomous snakes, then, making sure that there's at least a general awareness, and know that snakes are more scared of you than you are of them. And but and that's part of that citizen science approach. It's that being aware of the animals that are around us that are actually not as scary as the movies might make sense. I mean, I'm not downplaying the fact that they are poisonous, but the fangs are pretty small. So
I think our reputation as Australians is very strong around the world, but it is a serious topic about how bringing biodiversity and wildlife into cities. But just following on, I've got one follow-up question for you, Kathy, which I think is an important one to kind of draw out a bit, is about has the City of Melbourne, or perhaps how has the City of Melbourne, this is from Marla, about how has the City of Melbourne worked with transnational city-to-city exchanges to enhance kind of knowledge and understanding on nature-based solution projects? Could you just say a few words on that to finish off our first set of questions?
Carl/Charlie, he mentioned Malmo's green factor, and certainly, I mean, when I first proposed the idea of us making sure we learn from cities like Malmo and Seattle and Tokyo and where there are green factor tools, there's certainly a lot we can do in our transnational and our city networks. And I've been a proud member of ICLEI for many years, and ICLEI is one of the world leaders in biodiversity and urban nature, and Cities with Nature is an excellent platform that and I believe that there are sessions about this coming up, but ICLEI and IUCN and the Nature Conservancy have certainly bringing together some of that conversation where you don't necessarily have to be there in person, but you can exchange knowledge. And I mean, it's been crucial to not only innovation is all about, how can we take what other cities have done and recreate it in our own world with the local context in mind. You can't just pick up a high line in New York and bring it to Melbourne. It's not really going to look the same or be the same, but, we need to be inspired. Transnational city network exchanges not only inspire, but they also, put pressure on politicians perhaps to do more, because other cities are doing great things. But I know that the officers within my city learn a lot from exchanging knowledge with other cities. So I think it's really important, and really importantly as well, in-person visits are really important too, whether that's secondments, city to city exchanges, having the city architect or the landscapers swap between cities. We've certainly valued that exchange from a technical and a capacity perspective as well.
No, I mean, as you point out, this exchange of knowledge and understanding, and also people building networks with each other, but actually also physically being in places and experiencing them and so on, is just so important. I know that here in Sweden, they're talking a lot about creating virtual study tours of different parts of cities to deal with our new world and so on. But I still think the physical experiences can be pretty important. If we jump over to Peter again now, another theme we wanted to draw out today, and we've already touched on it already, and we're talking a bit about it, which is basically the barriers to nature-based solutions, and what we see is what's preventing kind of the unlocking of this potential. So I suppose the question to you, Peter, is what in your experience has been the biggest or the most difficult barrier to overcome to kind of get nature-based solutions working in your city, in Utrecht?
Yeah, that's a very important question, of course, because the importance is obvious. And then, why do we need to tackle a lot of problems? Well, a main problem, of course, is you've got a lot to do, and the question is how to combine the greener of the city with all the other important objectives of our policy. And how to find the real combination with which gives us the possibility to make work by work and so on, and also how to find the funds for investments, because it's, as I said, not a free lunch. And well, of course, it's a matter of the short run and the long run. In the long run, it's very clear that we should do this all. But in the short terms, it's not a question of very easy doing these things when you haven't got a lot of money. So how to manage this kind of things is one of the big problems. And you told about the new business models. We should well, in our city, we think it's very important to know a lot more about what is the value of things, not only in terms of the money, but also of the effect in social conditions and so on. But you can't give these things a price, not on the short term, I think. So this is one of the big problems. How can you, create a situation when all the participants who profit from this kind of greening cities have their share part in making it possible? And what means this for the business models you should manage? Well, as Carl said about the investment program and the developers, they are also part of this problem. And you should make not only with our inhabitants, with all their problems of daily living in a city, but also now a question of what is the knowledge to manage all these things in the long run. Maybe it's not one big problem, but there are a lot of problems to solve.
No, thank you, Peter. I mean, I think, as you point out, absolutely, it's a complex road to navigate, or a complex situation to navigate. But this kind of bringing together of different areas seems really, really important. Connecting the dots, as you say, and finding synergies between different kinds of work happening in cities. Just following on, we've got a question for Charlie. Someone, Mele again, actually, is very interested in stakeholder engagement with nature-based solution projects. And here comes, it's another question about kind of, in your experience, have you had situations in which you've had a project which has involved nature-based solutions either failed or got delayed, or where you've perhaps had to work in a more sophisticated way with the community to make sure the project was a success? Do you have any thoughts on that, Charlie?
Yeah, I'll try. But I think the big, what we found out quite some time ago then is, of course, that we need to start talking. It's not bringing a design and then have a process of engagement to react on a design or something. Then it's too late somehow, and it doesn't really it doesn't give as much to the project as we want. So for us, it had a lot to. We also started to hire anthropologists and other competences into the firm in order to really structure the way how to make those dialogues happening. And I mean, very early in the process and setting up, not having the normal way, just inviting people to come and have a discussion. We had to go out there and find them in their living environments and discuss when they were out shopping or when they are on their way to school or whatever. I mean, not having the old school of inviting people to come and have a discussion around something, really trying to go out where they are and trying to understand more about it. And of course there are success and failure stories into this, and I think, of course, we are always also it is a tricky situations that, I mean, coming from outside, it's still, I mean, you cannot be sure that you really get to understand really what's happening, because you have some sort of glasses on you when you're coming from outside, and I think that is the tricky thing, and of course that can be more or less manageable, but it's still the hard thing, of course. And then, I mean, it's also how we in the practice, our office itself, who are working in our office, and then it's, I mean, starting recruiting people from all over the city and having them joining us as a practice. Then we are sort of having the discussion more on a daily basis, and I think that's a way to manage it. But I think the failures, they are really when we are becoming more of an expertise role and having we need to find the right way to do the dialogues, and I think we are learning a lot, and that's also why it's so interesting to do this in new places. I mean, because then of course we are, I mean, meeting other people, and we can hire other people, and it's a learning process, and I think you said that, Kathy, before. I mean, we need to share knowledge into this. It's the only way we can move forward. And coming into this complex world of dialogues, I really think we have a lot to learn in that sense. Yeah.
No, I mean, great point, Carl. I mean, I think all the speakers are pointing towards this, aren't they, about engagement of citizens, engagement of different kinds of actors in cities that may not normally have been involved in these kinds of questions, bringing together different disciplines in the academic world, working together that may not have traditionally worked together, and so on. So I think this is a common theme, and I think that what we do see in like a project like Naturvation and in other projects happening in Europe and around the world is a lot of efforts in this space. I think it's a tough work, but it's worthwhile. It's the kind of work you want to invest into. I have one more question for you, Carl. This is a good one, actually. From they're all good questions, but I like this one. This is from Priya I think she might be in India, but she's interested to know about how can we help prioritize nature-based solutions in countries like India, or let's say in Africa, where there's a strong demand for space, in these big cities. So space is at a premium. How do we integrate nature-based solutions when there's a lot of different interests in these different spaces?
Yeah, density as a whole, I mean, it's a big question, and we know how that has been questioned now from the pandemic and everything on that. But very interesting question. I think it's a lot about I mean, living in the north, where we have a lot of space. Of course, I'm not the one to answer really this question. I mean, so this is really a way where I think I'm the one who need to learn from the situation there in that sense. So, so my answer would be, we need to discuss more and share still some of the experiences, and then I mean, there are special contexts, of course, but I'm sure, I mean, with the new way of new technologies, I mean, we shouldn't forget about that can also help to some extent into this, and when it comes to farming and things like that. So I mean, of course, we know we learn more, but about density, as a Swede, I'm afraid I'm not the expert in that, living in the big forests. Yeah.
No, it is true in Sweden we have a bit of space. No, I was more referring to your experience with projects around the world, but I think as you're pointing to, I mean, this is where you do have to be very sensitive to context and cultures and know where you're working and know these kinds of issues.
Just adding to that, I think it will be a big discussion about the density in the future now for many reasons. So I think we will have that would be a hot topic. Yes.
I think so as well. I can see Kathy is raising her hand. Kathy, I'll be a nice moderator. I'll let you jump in. Would you like to add something?
Oh, I just wanted to jump in because actually this morning I started actually in Rio. Today I end up in the Netherlands and Sweden, but this morning I joined the 20-year anniversary of Catalytic Communities, which is an amazing organization working with the favelas in Rio and the Sustainable Favelas Network. And it was just inspiring. And I guess just listening to, this conversation, and I think the responses were quite right, that, the solutions are in the communities where where the greening is most needed. And I think that, if anything, we need to empower local communities to make, decisions based on their context, and also understanding that there's so much information and in the communities that live in such dense environments as to how they can incorporate, whether it's nature or responses or action to climate change. So I just wanted to, put that in there. And I think certainly there are projects that the ICLEI have been running Interact Bio, where they have been working on nature-based solutions projects with cities in India and I think in Brazil as well. And yeah, anyway, there's some inspiration there, but that's all I just wanted to jump in with. I think the response is right, that it's actually, it is about communities leading a lot of this, but, certainly in understanding the expertise or the knowledge that they may need, to help with their capacity, but they may not need it. They just might need more resources to actually implement the visions that they have in the first place.
No, good point. Just adding on, I think when we talk about density and space in cities, I think nature-based solutions help us to understand that there's more space in cities than perhaps we thought was there. For example, rooftops and facades and back lanes and so on. So I think there's a opening up of our understanding of what constitutes space in cities. But now we're in the final 10 minutes of our session, and I'd like to turn our attention to the question that is underneath this session, which is about unlocking the potential of nature-based solutions. And of course, we're talking about this all the time. But there's a few questions coming in here, actually. And Peter, I'm going to jump to you now. We've got a question from one of our good friends, Rob Raven, down in Australia, who is interested to know if you think that the term nature-based solutions and the concept has been a benefit in practice to greening cities, or has it helped you in your journey to work with these issues?
Yeah, in general terms, of course, it is. Well, difficult to say more about this because nature-based solutions, of course, are part of a bigger strategy. And well, developing a city as Utrecht is a very complicated and broad program, of course. And well, the concept of nature-based solutions helps us to make this program more friendly, more humane, more well, of course, in the long term, or more realistic, I think. So this is all what it is. Well, there's a lot more to say, but this is the essence, in my opinion.
Oh, absolutely. A tough academic question from Rob down in Australia, wanting to know how these terms are used. I think we know there is a lot of terms and concepts in this space, and many of them are pointing in the same kind of direction. I mean, I think that the term nature-based solutions has certainly been fantastic in the European perspective. I think that it's launched off and sparked off many initiatives and many projects and so on, many discussions about how does nature relate to our cities and how do we think about urban development in relation to things like climate change and biodiversity loss and so on. So from that perspective, I think that we've seen a lot of positive benefits. But of course, there are all kinds of terminology around for us to use. But moving to this final question, I mean, now that nature-based solutions are on the agenda and are gaining more attention, I mean, what do each of you think that we really need to unlock their potential and launch off into the greening of cities in the 21st century? So I'm going to jump to Charlie first. What do you say, Charlie? Not in 10 minutes. Give it to me in a minute. I want the brilliant answer.
Oh,
what do you think we need? Or what's one thing that you think is really important that can unlock the potential?
Yeah, I think what we are doing now is, of course, very, very useful. I mean, we having talks like this, but having said that, I mean, we are all convinced. So now we have to take it out to a much broader audience and about that. And then I think it's important. I mentioned business before, but now I will stress talking about the health aspects into this and the social aspects. I mean, because that is what we really, as humans, care about. I mean, our health and what sort of life we are living. So I think having that into the story of why we need more of nature-based solutions, health and this a good living, social from a social point of view. Yeah, that's my short answer.
Brilliant and clear cut. Health, very, very good. I'm going to jump over to Kathy quickly. Kathy, I mean, what do you think? What is it that we can really unlock the potential of nature-based solutions? And we still have 5 minutes, so we're looking all right. So you can spend a few minutes thinking about this one and discussing it.
Oh, there's so much, right? But maybe I'll go with, but you have to continue to inspire with the tangible, and and that's that the demonstration of what it is that we're talking about. Will continue to inspire people who are not like us, that might talk about it every day, to not have to be continually reminded about the importance of greening in our cities. I'm thinking of our response to the green recovery, I'm starting to see a bit of a shift back to business as usual. And whilst, of course, we're bringing in parklets and we're bringing in trees and we've got a really big, investment in greening, but there's still this tendency just to go back to the business as usual and the usual way that cities are run and managed. So I guess it's just continue to inspire through demonstration projects that that this should be mainstream, to use another terrible overused term perhaps, but to continue to not have to be bringing it up all the time, that it is just the usual. So inspiring examples.
No, I mean, I think this is the point you're making about inspiration is actually very important. And sometimes, we do talk about it, but sometimes we downplay it a bit, that, examples from around the world and different kinds of ways of working with nature and cities can actually, or does actually on a daily basis, inspire people to work with these issues in different ways. And I think, Kathy, you talked about earlier, you can't often just pick up an example. You can't take the Malmö Western Harbour and go plant it in Utrecht, or you can't take the High Line in New York or take it to Melbourne, but you can certainly be inspired by the ways they've worked and the ways they've thought about these issues and the ways they've brought different people together. So I think that in my experience working with municipalities, they are regularly inspired by each other about what they're doing and use that in almost their daily work. I think it's actually a fantastic thing we see in cities around the world. But I'm going to open the stage or the door to you also, Peter, on this big question. I mean, what do you feel is, one or two kind of key things that need to happen to really unlock the potential? I mean, I think in your talk, you pointed to many of them and are in fact working on many of these in Utrecht. But any final thoughts you'd like to share with the audience?
Yeah, thank you. When we talk about healthy city, we have 3 lines in it. We have the healthy behavior of people, we have the healthy environment, and we have the idea of using your healthy mind. To point at the last thing, I think it's very obvious also in the actual times that we should search for a good balance to relate the development of the city to nature questions. And then, of course, the nature-based solutions are more sustainable than all the other ones. And I think this is the important thing to know and to handle as a possibility to do the good things.
Sorry, I do have to unmute myself if you're going to hear me. We are now in the final few minutes of our session. I think that we have explored a great diversity of topics. There are so many questions coming in on the chat. We've tried to grab as many as we can. These questions remain on the platform, so you can kind of see what people are thinking around the world. All good things must come to an end, and I think that I will draw this session to a close now. I would like to thank our 3 speakers today, Kathy, Carl, and Peter. Fantastic you have us with us. Fantastic that you could share kind of your thoughts and experiences on nature-based solutions from your perspectives and so on. I would also like to thank our global audience for tuning in. It is an amazing thing, online events, that we can speak to so many people in so many different places all over the world, live as we are doing now, but also you'll be able to see these kind of films later on and so on. As I said at the very beginning, there is so much content and activities happening on our platform today, on our Naturvation website, and many tools that have come out of the Naturvation project. it's a universe to explore if you're interested. And I can guarantee you will find something interesting and something inspirational from our work. I may be slightly biased, but I'll still suggest that you check it out. I'd also like to say thank you very much to Harriet Bulkeley, the coordinator for the Naturvation project, pulling this whole ship all the way along to this point and beyond. Thank you for being here for today, and I'm sure that you're going to pop up in sessions later on. Thank you to our, great to have you here, Harriet.
Just to say, Kes, thank you very much for chairing today. It's been really great, and I'm sure the rest of the day will go as well.
I think so. So far, no technical errors. My final thanks, I'm going to say thank you to Lorna, who has been organising this entire event, and thank you to Hens and Yulia in the background, moderating the chat and sending questions in. This has worked brilliantly. Have a great day. Enjoy the conference, and see you again soon. I'll be popping up in some other sessions. Great to have you here. See you later.